Ladies and gentlemen, from the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice, Deacon Gerald Celente.
Hello, everyone. This is Deacon Celente of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace and Justice. What's going on in the world? War, hatred, denial, arrogance, stupidity, the way of the world. One day after another, watching society decline in front of our eyes, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And the damage of the COVID war is incalculable, how it's changed the lives and livelihoods of billions of people around the world. And they call it a pandemic. Pandemic. They coined that term, pandemic, in March of 2020, when some 4,000 people were dead in the United States. 4,000 people out of 332 million, and they called it a pandemic, the World Health Organization. Wrote about it in the Trends Journal. It wasn't, and now people repeating, the pandemic did this, the pandemic did that. The pandemic, let's see. Less than 7 million people died from the coronavirus out of a global population of 8 billion. And of course, most of the people that died from the COVID had pre-existing comorbidities and were elderly, also with pre-existing comorbidities. Which means that 99.91% of the people are still alive. 99.91% of the people still alive. And you're calling it a pandemic? If 10% died, rather than 0.09% died, then we could call it a pandemic. But no, we're going to sell fear and hysteria. It's the way of the world. And if you don't obey, if you don't do what you're told, then you are a criminal. You don't obey the government, and the government knows better than you. All you are is a plantation worker on the global plantation of Slavelandia. Making up things stand 1 meter apart. The wind blows exactly in straight lines, 1 meter. Doesn't go up, doesn't go down, doesn't go around. Putting those stupid plexiglass things, remember? Doesn't go like that. Air, no, stops dead center of the plexiglass. Keeps going on. The damage it's done is incalculable. And again, we write about it all in the Trends Journal, trendsjournal.com, the office building bust, on and on and on. But I mention this because it just shows the decline of society and what society looks like. Once upon a time, women used to dress up with beautiful dresses and beautiful shoes and looking lovely. And now what do they wear? Dungaree overalls. And guys my age with hats on in very nice restaurants, baseball caps. And young people having them on backwards. So they're going to put a catcher's mask on next. Style gone. Obesity, 42% of Americans. 70% overweight. Mental illness going through the chart, off the charts. Suicide rates. Drug addiction. So what do you do about it? The Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice, along with Occupy Peace, are doing everything we can. Everything. And we're going to be having a rally up here in Kingston, New York, on the Four Corners of Freedom, John and Crown Street, where the seeds of democracy was sown. It was the first capital of New York State. And over 70% of America's Constitution came from the Constitution that was written here for New York State. And John Jay, the Supreme Court, oh yeah, he was a judge here. May 27th. And big news. RFK Jr.'s campaign manager, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign manager, the former congressman, Dennis Kucinich, is going to be here speaking on behalf of RFK Jr. Gary No, I mean, this guy's an author, health expert. Again, we're doing everything we can. This is more than just a peace and freedom rally. It's make America healthy again, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. John Whitehead, a civil liberties expert at the top of the order, the Rutherford Institute. Frank Morano, political commentator, and much more. Craig Giardulo, a journalist and a real activist, plus others. And going to hear more from Kennedy as well. We're doing everything we can to change this around. So the renowned experts, this lineup, will share the insights of physical, spiritual, and patriotic aspects of making America healthy again. And I just gave you a list of some of those you're going to hear from. I'm mentioning this because united we stand, divided we die. World War III has begun. As over 70% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, just sent another $1.2 billion to keep bloodying the killing fields over there in Ukraine. Oh, that was after $300 million was sent the week before. Oh, and the UK are sending these deadly missiles to ramp it up, and Europe just sent over another $1 billion worth of weapons. And what did Russian President Vladimir Putin say last Tuesday or last Monday on the Victory Day event? An actual war has once again been unleashed against our motherland. Okay, there you got it. Those aren't my words. Those are Putin's words. I said World War III began when this happened. It's happened. Here we go. Excuse me, this was Tuesday because it was reported on Wednesday in the Wall Street Journal. See it? Putin slams West support for Kyiv. They go on to note that 27 million Soviet citizens died during World War II. 27 million. 27 million. And as RFK Jr.'s uncle, President John F. Kennedy, said in his commencement speech at American University in June of 1963, 5 months before they killed him, which RFK Jr. says the CIA killed him, he talks about the Soviets, Soviet Union, and how these people suffered more than anybody in World War II. And they lost the land, farms, people, factories, the equivalent of Chicago to the East Coast. And he says we should love them. We shouldn't hate them. Yeah, we disagree with them, but we're not going to go to war against them. Because if we do, Kennedy's words, life on Earth will end within 24 hours. This is 1963, not 2023, where the advancement of these deadly weapons has skyrocketed. So it might be less than 24 hours before all annihilated. And who's speaking of peace? You're not allowed to speak about peace on the mainstream media. You're not allowed. Only war is prohibited. Allowed, rather. Peace is prohibited. So we're doing everything we can to fight as warriors for the Prince of Peace, to bring peace on earth, goodwill to all. Because if you don't do something, guess what? You deserve what you get. Sorry. You deserve what you get if you do nothing to change the course of death and destruction that's on our doorstep. Sweden holds largest military exercise in 30 years. Sweden is at war. Provocatively states the Swedish Armed Forces in one of their announcements for Aurora 23, Sweden's largest military exercise since the end of the Soviet Union. 26,000 troops are involved in the operation. Isn't that great? And again, Britain's sending long-range missiles. It's right here. Sweden announced last year it would increase its military budget by 64%. And they note in Stockholm, demonstrations were held at the beginning of the exercise. Several hundred protesters also demonstrated in Gothenburg. Several hundred. That's it. The masses don't go out. We need you here on May 27th. And we need you to bring as many people as you can so we can keep this global peace movement going before we're annihilated. We have mentally deranged people running and ruining our lives. Look at their faces. Listen to their words. From antiwar.com. U.S. UK vow to keep supporting Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and British counterpart James Cleverly vowed on Tuesday that the U.S. and Britain will continue supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. Continue supporting, we're at war with Russia, regardless of the result. Quote, we need to continue to support them, irrespective of whether this forthcoming offensive generates huge gains on the battlefield. Because until this conflict is resolved, and resolved properly, it's not over, said James Cleverly. That's the counterpart of Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States. Resolved properly. Cleverly knows what properly is. We have maniacal, evil people in charge. This is the quote in response to that from Antony Blinken, the United States Secretary of State, and who, since he's been in Washington, has loved every war, from the Iraq War to the Afghan War to the Syrian wars to the Libyan wars to every war. Oh, the Antony Blinken that went over to Saudi Arabia when the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Barack Obama, he was an undersecretary of state under him, went there when the Saudis invaded Yemen and have killed nearly 400,000 Yemenis, half of which are under the age of 5. That Antony Blinken to bring intelligence and other vital information to help the Saudis win. A war that began in 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 8 years later. So here's his response. Blinken responded, quote, "I can only violently agree with my friend and strongly endorse what he said. We have exactly the same perspective." Violently agree? In all my life, I've never heard that term before. Violently. We violently agree to keep killing and murdering. Violently agree, and nobody talks about this other than Deacon Salente of the Universal Church of Freedom, Peace, and Justice. Where are all the religions? All with lockjaw? Or maybe they love war too. Where are they? Silence. Why aren't they condemning this? What God do they believe in? This is satanic. Violently agree? So, one after another. One country in Europe after another ramping up spending to build up the war machine. Preparing to fight. So, it's up to the people to stop it, unless you want these leaders to lead you to death, because that's where they're taking us. So please donate all you can of what you want to bring peace on earth, goodwill to all, or do nothing. Shut your mouth and be a good boy and girl. Do what your leaders tell you to do. Look what happened over there in the UK with the coronation of the king. Here comes the king. What king? It's a human being like anybody else, not nobility. But UK police arrests. Yep. The police in London have expressed regret about a number of protesters they detained on the sidelines of the coronation of King Charles III last Saturday, fueling a national debate about the policing of an event and about a new anti-protest law that officers use to arrest the people. The law, called the Public Order Act of 2023, came into effect days before the coronation. Extended powers, you ready? To detain and charge those that the police suspect of mounting or preparing potential disruptive protest. Why, how dare you have a disruptive protest? You just be a good boy and girl. And from the British police head, quote, "The police will make decisions on when they use these powers." Oh, that was from British Prime Minister Sunak. Oh, yeah. From the multi-millionaire family. Freedom gone in a country near you. So please do what you can to support us, because we're doing everything we can to support you. Can't do it alone. It's up to the congregation to make it happen. So please do what you can to support freedom, peace, and justice. Go to our website, freedompeacejustice.com, and make a donation for the rally. And most of all, please try to get here. It's going to start at 1 p.m., May 27th, Memorial Day weekend, on the four corners of Freedom, John and Crown Street. RFK Jr.'s campaign manager, Dennis Kucinich, the one and only Gary Nolan, John Whitehead, Frank Morano, and Craig Giardulo. And, of course, the deacon will be there too. We'll see you then. Amen and amen.